Let's get started. I don't want to wait till 10. What's up? I'm Tanner Lindsley. I write React stuff a lot, and sometimes you listen to me. Today, I wanted to just quickly go over some patterns that I've been thinking about for managing global state with hooks. I don't have too much time, so I'm going to be running through it, and I have some code that I've already built here, just kind of running through some of these ideas. So let's dig in. Let's see. So here we've got a little code sandbox I have where obviously we're managing counter state, but we're doing it globally. I'm just going to show you how the entry point, and we can just kind of go through the code from there. So importing some styles, whatever. So first off, I wanted it to kind of feel a little bit like Redux. I like Redux's approach to code organization and whatnot. But there are some things that I don't like about Redux, obviously, which is why I'm using hooks to manage state now. But first off, I wanted to import the store from wherever the store is being created. So I import the store, and then I want to import any initial state. This is kind of like when you're composing reducers in Redux, but not quite. But still, I'm importing initial state from the global count. It's like a sub-state of the store, right? As count, and then I am importing, let's see, the counter component, and then I'm building the initial state right here. So, hold on a second. This initial state gets passed into the store provider at the top of the app, and then you just render your app however you want. So this kind of feels like how you would compose reducers with Redux, but you're just composing the initial state and feeding it into the provider. And then you can just use your counter component. You can use whatever components however you want. So as you build more substates, you could import their initial states right here and pass them into the provider. Or if you have an initial state from the server or from some other place, you could just pass it in right there as well. So first things first, let's take a look at the store. So the store component, or the store file right here, imports a utility called MakeStore, and then just default exports a new store. So have you used Easy Peasy? It adds hooks to an already created Redux store. You can have effects, memoized selectors, plus have the ability to use existing tools. I feel like I've seen Easy Peasy, Kevin, but I don't know. I don't really want to pile more things on top of Redux. Like the entire purpose for what I am trying to do right now is just pare down dependencies. Pare down. I want to stay away from it now. And I don't even want to have to deal with anything that has to do with Redux anymore, unless I'm working on a massive application that everybody's on board with Redux. Still, you'd have to convince me. There's some good things about Redux. I can talk about them later. But for most use cases, I don't think it's necessary anymore. So this store file, I'm just default exporting a MakeStore. Let's go look at MakeStore because it's kind of important. So MakeStore is kind of where all of the magic happens for context and whatnot. Let's see, I'm not using that anymore. Okay, so out of the gate, we import, use memo, and use context. Those are going to be important. I'm using Emmer here. What's up with the Emmer version of handle the global state? Yeah, I am using Emmer to manage the global state. So right now, I'm not using an action reducer pattern just yet. I plan on gradually upgrading my stuff to use an action reducer pattern in the future if I want. But actually right now, I'm going to show you why I don't think that's too much of a problem. So I'm just using Emmer for now in a single top level state. So this is a factory to make a new store instance. You can actually have multiple stores, but you just won't be able to see the data between them very easily unless you import both of them. There's reasons for that. But this MakeStore just returns one new instance of a store. And then we create a new React context for that store. Then we make a new provider. And the provider just takes children, and then it takes the initial state that we talked about right here and passes that into use Emmer. If you don't know what Emmer is, you should go look at it. It's just called Emmer.js. You can Google it. It'll show up. It's a way to handle state mutably, but it outputs immutable objects. So managing objects mutably is really convenient most of the time. But for React and for performance purposes and for like change detection, we want to do a mutable transformation. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. But it gives us back some state and some set state. This should probably look very familiar. We are going to memoize the context value really quick. So anytime the state changes, we will update the context value. Otherwise, we don't want to update the context value. And then we pass it down through the provider and do the children. So yeah, our provider just looks like that. The store is really simple. Oh, I export a default, or I export just like a single object as provider and use store. And then I export that as a singleton actually out of my store right here. You could import the provider and the use store separately if you wanted and export them separately, but I don't do that. Oh, the other cool thing is a lot of libraries, they say, oh, now you just use context and then you import the store context. Well, you don't even have to do that with this. I provide a use store function that just has use context and the context already in it. So it gives you the store right away. So MakeStore, let's see, we can close that. MakeStore, we talked about all of this. Okay, so let's go into the substate, the count substate. So count, if you look at the folder structure here, I have the index of the store right here. Then I have this count substate on the store. And I'm exporting the initial state, which could be an object for all we care. But right now it's just a number. And then I'm just exporting hooks, basically. You might be wondering, like, where's the actions, I guess. Yes, the use store pattern is so nice. Thank you. I love it. I'll show you why I love it. But like you might be wondering, like, where are the actions? Where are the reducers? Well, the reducers, technically, because we're using Emmer, the reducers live inside of the actions that use them. They don't have to be. We could actually separate these out into our own actions if we wanted and have them up top. But really, I want the public API for our store.useStore, which would give us the store value and then the set state for that. But since we don't need the set state, we just leave it out. And then we destructure count out of it. Since count is getting put on our initial state right here, we just destructure count out of it. And if we wanted, we could even do something like this and say use count. We could just have it do this. Yeah, it just returns the count. I don't even know why I said that. But you could make reusable hooks up here. Like if you just wanted to get at a certain substate all the time, then you can reuse that hook down in these other ones. So if we use count, it's just going to return the count, and that's really easy. If we have this function called use increment. So when we call use increment, it's going to get the set state instance from the store, and then it's going to return a function that will allow us to increment the count. So what does that look like? It looks like this in the counter. So we import React. We import use count, use increment, and use decrement from the count substate. So it's kind of like this is like importing data. This is importing actions in a sense. So and you can write these to be however you want. I'll show you a different way that you can write them after this. That is really interesting. You could really take it both ways. So right now, and just say, hey, you know what? Give me the count from use count, and then I get increment and decrement from use increment and use decrement, and then I can use those right here. And hey, guess what? It works. It's actually really cool. So the reason I like this pattern is because I can if I had multiple stores, I could import state and actions from multiple sub-stores, and like I wouldn't be have to be composing actions together, composing reducers together. And then the other reason I like it is, so using hooks is weird because basically what we're doing is we're replacing the connect. Like, you know how in Redux you would have to connect your component, and that's what would wire up all of your state, and that would wire up all of your actions to the dispatcher and to the store. Well, hooks basically let us do that in and of themselves. Since hooks have to be done at the top level of the function, basically, or just at least unconditionally within the rule of hooks, we wouldn't be able to do something like use increment, you know, and call that right here, because that would be called unconditionally. But what we do is we call use increment that gives us the increment function that is tied to the store. And this, you know, if you have a ton of actions here, this might get monotonous. And really, if they only access the store or the store set state, you wouldn't have to write separate actions for this. In fact, one way that I've seen people do this is they will return these substates like this. So they'll get count, they'll get set state right here. They'll just remove all of this right here. They will return the count, and then they will return the actions inside of here. So they'll be like const increment equals that, and then they will return increment and decrement. Decrement. And you know, this return kind of looks like the use state in some sense. So now we just export one use count hook. It's getting the bindings from everything. So over here in our counter now, we don't have to import these other ones. We technically could just say, you know, I want to use the count state, substate, and it would give us the count, and then it would give us the increment and decrement. Let's see. Is able to add a logger to the pattern? Diego DeBonis. Absolutely. So that's the cool thing about this is since we own, because the top level is being wrapped with the provider and the context updates when the store is updated, anything using the store, even through a custom hook like we've done, that value is going to be up to date as far as the last render cycle that it went through. So yes, it will be in sync. And okay, so this pattern actually, some people think this is a lot easier. I think this is pretty cool, where you say, okay, we're going to import the state, and then we're going to import, or the use count gives us the state and the actions. Then we can just use them like this. And you're only importing one thing, and you're kind of using the same set state for all of this. And what's really cool is some people might say, oh, well, you might be making these increment and decrement functions over and over. Well, if you wanted, you could say use callback to create these functions and tell that callback to only update when set state updates, which set state will technically never update from use Emmer, at least as far as I know. So if we import use callback from React, I don't think that's too big of a deal. Most people are like, oh, well, the increment and decrement functions will be getting created on every single run. Man, I'm so tired of people talking about that. Like, unless you can prove that creating these functions is actually slow, which 99.99999% of the time I would wager that it's not. It's actually pretty fast. So you don't really need to use the use callback, in my opinion. But hey, if you are OCD like that, then you can. Oh crap, I undid too far. Okay, so let's see. So this is another way to do it, and that's why I like this pattern, because it's just hooks. You know how they say like, oh well, when you use local state, it's just React. Well, now you can say it's just hooks. You know, you're importing some state, you're importing the actions to manipulate that state. So the other cool thing that we can do is, this isn't, I hate using contrived examples that are too simple. But basically, if you had some memoized values, like if you had some values that like you normally would have selectors in with Redux, you can actually mimic that with use memo. So if we wanted to do like some computed count, you know, which is something that was like an expensive function, or we wanted to select it from somewhere else, or say we wanted to like we wanted to get some like other count from a completely other store or another substate or whatever, you know, from use other count, like it could be anywhere, and then you wanted to compute those together, and it was like an expensive operation. Man, I hate saying that, it's so contrived, but you can understand that you run into expensive operations. That's why selectors exist. You could say count plus, you know, other count is going to equal this computed count, but you don't want to do that on every single render. You know, it's not like creating a function is one thing, but computing heavy things is another. So we could use memo here and say, you know what, return the count and the other count, but only do that when count or other count change. That way, this computed value is basically like a selector. You know, it's like, hey, we're selecting this computed value when these things change. And you can send that computed count down the line. And then what's great is you know that that computed count is only going to change when it should, or this work is only going to be done when it should. And then anything else that uses computed count down the line, any hooks that use the count substate, they could also compute things on top of this. So then you get into this nested selector pattern. Really all it is just nested. It's not really nested, it's just composed hooks together that memoize values down the chain. And you get the same benefits that you would with selectors. It's really cool. We don't need to, like, that was very contrived. Maybe I'll have to do a separate video on that. But it's really cool. Use memo is like the coolest thing ever. Whole code here really quick. I have, let's see, no, that's not it. Login. So I have like a login component here. It's pretty messy. I'm still refactoring some of it. But right here you can say, look, I need the location information, so I use location using some local state. But then right here, where I would normally connect to my auth or my user substate in Redux, I just have a hook that I import. Let me make this bigger for you. I have a hook that I import from the auth store, and it has use auth. And then I say, hey, I want to use the auth, and it gives me, you know, hey, what's the active user? Is auth loading right now? And then I can import all of these actions, if you will, by using hooks. Use login, use whatever, use check auth. And then I can use those however I want. And then if you go over to my auth store, like use auth is just subscribing to the store and returning store auth. In fact, I should just do that. And then let's see, use check auth. It's like, hey, import the store, so I need set store, and then I'm going to return this really big hefty function that does a bunch of stuff, where I set it to loading, and then I set the result. It's kind of like, you know, loading, get the thing, set the error. It's your action reducer pattern, just about. Use login. So you create your actions as hooks, if that makes sense. And that, I realize that's kind of a bold statement, maybe not. There's probably there's so many other ways that people want to manage their state, and hooks is just one way. But I love it. It's all clean. And if you notice, all of this code is code that we can control. And let's see, that question. Let's see. Are you able to add a logger into the pattern? So yeah, we can add a logger. The question is, how much information can we actually log? So if we wanted to do a logger, one way that we could do it is we could say Emmer set state. Let's call this Emmer set state. And then right here we're going to say the real set state is this function that has all the arguments, and then we're just going to pass it around basically to the Emmer set state with the args. But before we do that, we are going to console log action, or we'll just call it set state, and then we're just going to log the args. And then let's see, no, we don't want to log the args. Set state, this is basically just going to be an updater, so we'll just log the updater. And then we will, let's see, const next equals Emmer set state. Can we use Emmer set state like that? I don't know if we can use Emmer set state like that. Does it return it? Let's find out. Let's see. Use Emmer set state, probably won't return anything. Let's say console log next. Man, I don't even know if this is going to work. This could be one reason not to use the use Emmer. Let's see, provider set state. Oh, we got to pass through our normal set state. Okay, so it's not giving us back the value. But say set state is like it's passing through this function. The console for Code Sandbox is not going to give us what we want. So let's actually go in here. So if we hit increment, it says set state draft draft.count plus plus. Yeah, so I mean it would show us the function that's updating the state basically, which is pretty helpful if we wanted to actually show the next statement to do this. So if you want to bear with me while we try and do this in a custom way, we can. So we're going to import Emmer from Emmer. So instead of use Emmer, we're going to pull in just Emmer. First argument is not a function. Okay, so we already have Emmer. And so we're going to need our own use state right here. So instead of use Emmer, we're going to use state. And this is just this is set state right here. And this is our Emmer set state. And it's going to take an updater. We're going to log the updater. And then we're going to get the next value by running Emmer on, or no, first we need to call set state. And then we're going to get the old version of the state. And then we are going to run that through Emmer. We want to, let's see, const result equals Emmer old. And let's see, Emmer old. I think that's how Emmer, I think it's updater. Let's double check that. Use Emmer. Produce. Okay, yep. So it gives the old one, takes the updater function, get the result. So we'll say console log before, and we'll log the old state, which, yeah, should be the actual old state. And then we'll get the result, and we'll say console log after. We'll log the result, and then we'll return the result back to our set state, and we'll just call this next. And then we will pass the Emmer set state down as our normal set state. So now if we open up our console, if we increment, we get hey, set state, you know what, let's do this. So hit increment, it says, hey, store is updating. Before, it had this count. The updater is this function. It takes the draft, it increments the draft.count. The draft is just the root, and then afterwards the count is this. So decrement, 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 increment, increment, yeah. So this would show the entire global state is what it would do. So yeah, you can add logging. Just to kind of sum up and close out this this live stream, you know, Redux is great because it gives you really good logging. That's one of the reasons that people really like Redux, is you have the Redux dev tools which show you exactly what's happening, and you can, you know, roll back time and time travel. But if I'm being honest, I rarely use time travel. Time travel is a really neat concept. It's really cool, and it was a great selling point to get people excited about Redux, that it was even possible. But I just don't think people use it a lot in the wild, and if you do, that's great. But personally, I don't. So the other reason that Redux can be really good is it forces you to write everything in terms of actions. And actions are not like functions. They're serializable. And what that means is that if we wanted to log out the action that was happening, it would have an action name, and it would have any parameters that action name or that action needs, and we could log that out, and it's just be JSON, right? We could actually serialize that that JSON and send it across the wire to some analytics or some bug reporting. It gives us a clearer view of what's happening in terms of like leaving breadcrumbs throughout the process of the state changing. More so than just a function does, right? And you know, you could easily turn this into using an action pattern if you want, that would allow us to do that. And I don't know, maybe we should do that. Would you guys like me to show you how to do an action reducer pattern just using use state? Would that be cool? If not, then we can just do it in another video or something. But I hope you guys can see that like hooks are really powerful. The fact that you can control everything in here is really great. And so far I've replaced about 60 to 70% of all of Nozzle's state management with just these, like just this little tiny pattern, and it's been fantastic. Yeah, and you know what? I haven't been using Redux dev tools to look at stuff. Guess what? I haven't missed it. It just hasn't been something that I've missed. So yeah, I'm not getting any responses from anybody. So it sounds like this video is done. This is probably not the end of my state management journey with React hooks, but it definitely is the beginning. It's really simple, really straightforward. You can compose it and build it however you want. It gives opportunity for have to use all the time. You get reliable updates. Yeah, it's great. So I hope you guys like this video, and sorry it's been a while since I've done a video like this. I'm going to try and do more of them in the future, but this was really great. Thanks for listening.